Welcome aboard the Story Arc. I'm your captain, Kenny Mears, and let's take a voyage together. The Emperor's New Clothes is a classic tale from Christian Andersen with a timeless message about pride and being afraid to point out the truth. This is a story I personally love, and I am so excited that today's storyteller, friend of the show, Laurie Allen, is here to share with us. Here's Laurie.
The story I'm going to tell now was originally created by Christian Andersen, but it has been in the public domain for so long that now when you look it up, sometimes it just says it's a folk tale. It's called The Emperor's New Clothes. High up on a hill, there was a beautiful palace. And down the hill from that palace was a lovely village. Now, the emperor that lived in the palace, he ruled over that village and those farmlands, and he was a good ruler. The people really loved their emperor. He did not tax them overly much. He did not require a lot from them. He was interested in their lives. He was a good ruler. But he had one fault. He loved clothes. He loved clothes. This was back in the era with the long boots and the hats with the big feathers and the lace and the silk and the satin and the jewels, and he loved it all. He wanted it all. And when he got a particularly new set of clothes that were stunning, he would have a parade through town. He would go with his attendants and they would walk through town and he would show off his new clothes. Now, the people loved their emperor, and so they would go out to the parade and they would clap politely and roll their eyes and go back to their shops and their work because they did love their emperor, but this was a bit much. Well, one particular day, a couple of tailors, makers of clothes, came into town. And the minute they had heard about this emperor, they knew where they had to go. They went up to the palace. And when the servant opened the door and found out that they were tailors, they sent them straight in to the emperor. Now, these tailors said that they didn't sew ordinary clothes. Oh, no. They made their clothes from a fabric that was so beautiful and so lightweight that when you wore it, you would feel as if you were wearing nothing at all. But it had a special magical property. That fabric could only be seen by the truly wise and the truly noble. That was all the emperor had to hear. He knew he had to have clothes made from that fabric. He knew he was wise, he was noble, but then he could tell who in his kingdom was wise, who were noble. And so he told them that they could come in. He would promise them a big bag of gold at the end of this, gave them a beautiful room in the palace where they could set up their loom and their spinning wheel and all their supplies, gave them beautiful down beds to sleep on and the best food. And the deal was done. So the tailors went in and they set up their loom and they set up their spinning wheel and they started to spin and they started to weave. Now, the emperor was so excited about this that he checked in every couple of days to see how they were doing. And he'd walk in and he'd look. He could see the loom. He could see the spinning wheel. You know, this room just really needs more light. He just couldn't quite see the other things. And he would walk off and tell them, praise their industry. And he would walk off and kind of shake his head. He'd come in a couple days later. And he still couldn't see anything on the loom or on the spinning wheel. But he knew he was wise. He knew he was noble. It was just his eyes were tired that day. That was the problem. The servants, meanwhile, were also excited about this fabric. And they were in that hall. They would peek in the door and they would see the men working hard, but they couldn't see much else. But they were not going to admit that they were not wise. They were not going to say anything. And so in the kitchens, they would say, oh, did you see it? Oh, isn't it beautiful? Oh, yes, the color's just perfect. No one wanted to admit that they couldn't see anything. Well, this went on for quite some time, and the emperor kept checking in, and the servants kept peeking in, and everyone kept leaving, scratching their heads, not knowing exactly what to think, but they weren't going to say anything. Finally, the time came when the tailor said the cloth was finished, and it was time to cut out the clothes. So they got the emperor in the room. They stripped him down to his underwear so they could get all the measurements just perfect. And they measured his arms, and they measured his legs, and they measured around his neck, and they measured from his head, top of his head to the soles of his feet, and around every part, and wrote it all down so that these would fit him just as well as his skin did. Well, then the real work began, and there were scissors cutting, and there was all kinds of stuff laid out. But when they checked, they could see the scissors, they could see the needles and thread, but they couldn't see the cloth. But no one at this point was going to admit what they could not see. Finally, the clothes were finished, and it was time for the final fitting. They got the emperor in for the final fitting, and again stripped down to his underwear, and they put the clothes on him, and the hat and the boots and the shirt and the coat. And then they started looking and said, oh, we've got to take a tuck here. Oh, this has to be an inch shorter there, and this needs to be a quarter of an inch longer. We want these to be perfect. And they wrote down all the alterations. So now it was time to set up the parade. Now the people in town had heard about this wonderful clothing and the cloth, and so no one was skipping this particular parade. Oh no, the people from the stores were coming out. The people from the country were coming in. People took their children out of school. They lined the streets of the town for this particular parade, for they all wanted to know who was wise and who was noble. So the day came, and they dressed the emperor all in his clothes. He was all decked out. His attendants came and had a canopy that they carried over him, and they started the procession through town. And it was a longer procession than normal because people were lining the street clear down. And as he walked along, people were looking, and they were looking at their neighbors. And then they were saying things like, oh, isn't that lovely? Oh, I've never seen one quite like that before. But nobody dared say anything. He got clear to the end of town when he came by a 5-year-old boy standing there with his mother. 5-year-old boys tend to say what they think. And this boy looked out there and tugged on his mom and said, Mom, why is that emperor wearing nothing but his underwear? We are not supposed to go out in our underwear. Why is he walking through town in his underwear? Well, of course, everyone heard that child. And the people were so relieved because they all worried that they hadn't seen anything. They started just kind of laughing and sort of, this was such a silly situation. The emperor, his face went red. One of his attendants grabbed a cape and threw it around him, and they scurried back to the palace up the hill. The emperor was humiliated, and he was so sad. He put on some of his older clothes. He sat there, and he was talking to his attendants. He said, I can't even face those people again. And they said, Emperor, it's all right. The people were not laughing at you. They were laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Your people love you. You don't have to impress them with your clothes. That's not what they love. They love you. And the emperor realized that was true. The outside wasn't as important as what was inside, and he did love his people. And the emperor actually, after that, spent more time down in town. He would go into the shops. He'd ask the shopkeepers how their business was doing. He'd offer help to anyone who needed it. He'd ask about the girl that was getting married and the young man that was going into the military. And he truly cared about those people. And the villagers had all had a good laugh together. When you laugh with people, don't you get closer? And so those people and the emperor together all lived pretty happily ever after.
The Story Arc is a production of Food for Thought Audio. This episode was written, produced, and edited by me, Kenny Mears. We'd like to thank today's storyteller, Laurie Allen, for sharing her story. Laurie is a member of the Utah Storytelling Guild and Story Tours. You can find more information on her page with the Utah Storytelling Guild at utahstorytellingguild.website, as well as with Story Tours at storytours.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, or wherever you listen to podcasts for more content. And until next time, thanks for listening.